claiming my time.
Never
I agree with
mentioned
you. I agree with you. During the Biden administration, I called for people looking at Epstein files. Merrick Garland dropped the ball, as did Attorney General Bill Barr, as did Alex Acosta, a whole string of failures. But you are in charge. You have the power to change things, to hold these men accountable, and you're doing the opposite. You're protecting them. So I want to move on to another man.
Can I answer
Donald
that,
Trump.
though?
I want to move on to another
question. Can I answer your question about protecting
You answered the question.
You're saying no. I love this.
I want to discuss another man, Donald Trump, who is all over the Epstein files, like former Prince. Here's a video.
Nobody moved. Not the staffers, not the photographers, not the members of Congress seated in two curved rows behind their nameplates and their water glasses and their carefully prepared questions. Nobody moved, because the video was still playing. And in a United States congressional hearing room, a place governed by 5-minute clocks and parliamentary procedure, and the practiced performance of institutional calm, a video was playing on the screens, and no one could look away. It wasn't classified footage. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't obtained through some covert operation or late-night document leak. It had been sitting in public view for years, decades even. But there is a difference between something existing and something being played in a hearing room in front of cameras. With the Attorney General of the United States seated at the witness table. That is a different thing entirely. Congressional oversight hearings follow a rhythm. Members arrive. The witness takes the oath. Opening statements are read from printed pages, often by lawmakers who will leave before their own testimony ends. Then the questioning begins, 5 minutes per member, repeated down the roster, gavel to gavel. Most witnesses come prepared. They have rehearsed answers. They know which questions are coming. They know how to run out the clock. 45 seconds of preamble, a clarifying question back, a response that technically addresses the subject while revealing nothing of substance. It is a system designed over many years of practice and to produce the appearance of accountability without necessarily producing accountability itself, and most of the time it works exactly as designed. But on February 11th, 2026, in the Rayburn House Office building, before the House Judiciary Committee, something disrupted that rhythm. Not a revelation from a new document, not a whistleblower, not a surprise witness, a laptop, and a video file, and a congressman who had clearly decided that this particular 5 minutes would not be spent asking questions that could be answered safely. The footage itself was not new. Clips of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at social events had circulated publicly for years. They were documented. They were real. They were the kind of footage that existed in the background of news coverage, acknowledged, archived, and not seriously examined in any official proceeding. That is what made it significant. Not that it was secret, but that it had never been made part of the official record, never played in a congressional chamber, never placed before a sitting attorney general with a live microphone, under oath, on a day when she was supposed to be answering questions about the Justice Department's handling of the very investigation that surrounded the man in that footage. The moment something enters the congressional record, it is no longer background. It is no longer context. It is no longer a clip that someone once shared on the internet. It becomes evidence, and evidence demands a response. The hearing had been running for hours. Attorney General Pam Bondi had sat at the witness table since morning, working through members of the Judiciary Committee one by one. Republicans had praised her, Democrats had pressed her. She had deflected, counterattacked, pivoted to other attorneys general, and expressed sympathy for Epstein survivors in ways that she was immediately asked to reconcile with the department's conduct. By the time the hearing reached the 2.5-hour mark, the room had the particular exhaustion of a proceeding that has been intense without yet being decisive. There had been heat. There had been confrontation. There had been moments that would make the afternoon news cycle, but not yet the moment. The chamber itself is a tiered room, the kind designed so that the members of Congress look down at the witness, literally and architecturally. A raised dais, a long curved bench, microphones, flags, on the permanent furniture of American democratic theater. Cameras from multiple networks were stationed along the side walls. A row of journalists sat in the gallery. Behind the members, staff moved quietly with folders and phones. It was, in every outward sense, a normal hearing in progress. Then Representative Ted Lieu of California received the gavel. Ted Lieu is not a member who performs urgency. A former active-duty Air Force officer, a prosecutor before entering politics, he carries into questioning the particular discipline of someone who has learned to let the evidence carry the weight. He does not need to raise his voice. He does not need to display emotion. He has a way of asking questions that makes the witness feel the gravity before they understand exactly why they should be worried. On this morning, he arrived at his microphone without theatrics. No long setup, no extended preamble. He had 5 minutes, and he had clearly decided exactly what those 5 minutes would accomplish. He opened his laptop. He confirmed with the committee that the screens were active. He did not look at the witness while he did this. He looked at his screen. He looked at the room. He appeared to anyone watching closely like someone who had rehearsed this sequence and knew precisely how long it would take. He said he wanted to show something. He pressed play. The footage ran for approximately a minute. Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, a party, a private setting. The camera moving the way cameras moved at those kinds of events in those kinds of years. Casual, close, among friends. No voiceover, no narration, no commentary from Lieu. He let it play. And when he stopped it, he did not immediately speak. He allowed the image to remain on the screen for a moment. Then he looked at Attorney General Bondi, and he asked whether the Department of Justice had ever seriously investigated whether any of the individuals present at events like the one depicted, events where Epstein was present, where his known associates were present, where young women were present, had been identified, located, and interviewed as potential victims or witnesses in the federal investigation. It was not a complicated question. It was not a long question, but it was the kind of question that has no safe answer. Because if the answer was yes, the department had done that work, had found those people, had taken their statements, then the question immediately becomes, where are those statements? And why have they not been released under the Epstein Transparency Act? And if the answer was no, the department had not done that work, had not identified those individuals, had not pursued those leads, then the question becomes something else entirely. Either answer opens a door. Lieu already knew which door Bondi would try to find. There is a particular quality to silence in a congressional hearing room after a question has been asked. It is not like ordinary silence. It is loaded silence, charged silence. The silence of a room full of people who understand what they are watching and are waiting to see how it resolves. Bondi looked at the screen, then at Lieu, then at her notes. The pause lasted long enough that it became noticeable. That is not a common thing. Witnesses at these hearings are trained to respond immediately, to fill the silence before silence becomes a statement of its own. But there are moments when there is no immediate response because there is no good immediate response. Her posture shifted slightly, not dramatically, not in a way that a casual observer would necessarily catch. But it was there, the small adjustment that people make when they are computing, in real time, which version of an answer carries the least damage. Lieu waited. He did not repeat the question. He did not clarify. He did not provide a way out. He had asked a simple, clean question, and he was content to let the silence do exactly what silence does when an answer is not forthcoming. This was the moment, not the video, not the question. The silence after the question while the footage still sat on the screens, while the room waited, while the Attorney General of the United States, under oath, searched for a way to answer a question about a party and the people at that party and whether anyone had ever seriously tried to find out who they were. Lieu did not wait indefinitely. When the response came, partial, procedural, pivoting to the volume of documents the DOJ had released, to the millions of pages, to the complexity of the investigation, he let it complete, and then he went further. He referenced the Epstein Transparency Act, passed by Congress, signed into law, a bipartisan directive that the department release its investigative files. The DOJ had released documents, It had also taken down documents. Over 47,000 files removed after initial publication. More than 65,000 pages pulled back. He asked about specific materials that multiple media organizations had reported were not among those released publicly. Materials containing accusations that touched individuals still in positions of power. He asked whether the department had made decisions about which documents to release based on their content rather than their legal status. He asked whether the Attorney General could confirm that no one in the administration had communicated with DOJ about which files should or should not be made public. Each question was a step, each answer was a non-answer, and each non-answer brought Lieu one step closer to the question that the entire sequence had been building toward. He returned to the video. He noted that the footage depicted a specific event, a specific time, a specific location, and that federal investigators, in a serious investigation, would typically seek to identify everyone present at known Epstein social events. He asked whether that had been done. He asked whether those individuals had been contacted. He asked, slowly, precisely, without raising his voice, whether the Attorney General could say with confidence that the department had conducted a full and complete investigation, or whether it was possible that the investigation had been deliberately constrained. What followed was not a breakdown, it was not a dramatic implosion, it was something more instructive than that. Bondi pushed back. She accused Lieu of playing political games. She argued that his characterization of the DOJ's work was unfair. She pointed to the millions of documents released. She noted that she had sat at that table for hours and had answered questions in good faith. When Lieu interrupted to return to the specific question, had those individuals been identified and interviewed, she said the department had followed the law. He asked again, specifically, by name essentially, in the sense that he was asking about a category of person that a genuine investigation would have contacted. She said the department had followed proper investigative procedures. He asked whether she could confirm those people had been contacted. She said she was not going to get into the operational details of an ongoing matter. He noted that the investigation was not ongoing. Jeffrey Epstein had been dead since 2019. She said there were legal considerations she was not in a position to discuss in this setting. He noted that this was a congressional oversight hearing, which was precisely the setting in which those considerations were meant to be discussed. And at that point, with approximately 90 seconds left on the clock, she turned to the Republican members of the committee, not to Lieu, and said that she felt she was being accused of things that were not true and that she had dedicated her career to fighting for victims. It was the turn toward the sympathetic audience, the move witnesses make when they have lost the exchange but need the record to reflect something other than the exchange. Lieu looked at his notes, then back at her. He said he hadn't made an accusation. He had asked a question. He still hadn't received an answer. The gavel came down. His 5 minutes were over. Here is what was never answered, not deflected, not disputed, not contested, simply never answered. Whether the Department of Justice in its investigation of Jeffrey Epstein and his network ever systematically attempted to identify, locate, and interview the individuals present at Epstein's social events where the footage and photographic record documented the presence of powerful people. That is a yes or no question. It did not receive a yes. It did not receive a no. It received volume numbers, procedural references, claims of legal complexity, personal defenses of the Attorney General's character and career. In a courtroom, what a witness does not say is admissible. In a congressional hearing, what a witness does not answer becomes part of the record in a different way. It becomes the shape of the absence, the outline of something not disclosed. The most damaging thing about Lieu's 5 minutes was not the accusation. He made no formal accusation. It was the footage and the question that followed, and the space where an answer was supposed to be. Because if the investigation had been complete, if those individuals had been found and interviewed and their accounts had been taken, the answer to Lieu's question would have been simple, would have been easy, would have been delivered without hesitation by an attorney general who had spent the morning defending her department's record. She had no hesitation on the other questions. She was prepared, articulate, and combative throughout. On this one, she had no answer, and the room knew it, and the cameras knew it. And Ted Lieu, who had asked the question he came to ask, knew it before he pressed play. The hearing did not end. Witnesses do not leave when a difficult moment passes. The gavel comes down, the clock resets, and the next member takes their 5 minutes. Bondi remained at the table. More questions followed. Some were about immigration enforcement, some were about the DOJ's budget, some were about policy matters entirely unrelated to Epstein. The rhythm of the hearing reasserted itself, but the record had changed. The footage had been played in an official congressional proceeding. It was now part of the transcript. The question had been asked and not answered. That was now part of the transcript too. In the weeks following the hearing, the committee would vote, on a bipartisan basis, to subpoena Bondi for sworn deposition testimony specifically about the Epstein files. 5 Republicans would join Democrats in compelling her appearance. It would be described as a rare bipartisan rebuke. She would later be removed from her position as Attorney General, and when the committee's subpoena came due, the DOJ would argue it no longer applied because she no longer held the office she held when it was issued. The question would remain unanswered, the footage would remain in the record, and the shape of the absence would remain exactly where Lieu had placed it, in the transcript, in the timestamp, in the 5 minutes of congressional time that a former Air Force officer and prosecutor used not to make a speech, but to ask one question that had no safe answer. One video, one question, 0 answers. That is the official record of what happened in that hearing room during those 5 minutes. One former Attorney General, under oath, with every resource of the Justice Department behind her, and 2 years of preparation for exactly this kind of hearing. And she could not, or would not, say whether the people in that footage had ever been found. That silence is now permanent. It is part of the public record of the 119th Congress. It cannot be walked back, revised, or sealed. The hearing ended. The investigation did not. And somewhere in the 65,000 pages that were published and then quietly removed, somewhere in the documents that remain unreleased, in the depositions that haven't happened, in the names that haven't been spoken under oath, there are more questions that have no safe answers. We're watching to see who asks them next.